The man's hands shook as he pointed a cheap pistol at my wife's face, chest heaving with delusions of authority, right there in our front yard. All because she dared jog past the HOA clubhouse without a laminated ID badge. What he didn't know what would have been poetic to watch settle into his doughy, panic-stricken expression was that the woman he just threatened was Commander Rachel Vaughn, an active Delta Force operator who had returned from a Black Ops mission only 48 hours prior. She hadn't even unpacked her field gear, and now here she stood, in yoga pants and a hoodie, face to face with a wannabe rent-a-cop holding his gun sideways like he'd watched too many bad action movies. I could see it in her ice steel, the calculation, the calm of someone who had neutralized real threats in war zones under mortar fire. She could have dropped him with a shoelace and a twig, but instead, she gave him a chance to back down. He didn't. That's when hell cracked open. I remember the blur, his weapon hitting the pavement, his face kissing the sidewalk, and her standing over him like divine judgment in a ponytail. The real police arrived, took one look at her credentials, and said, "Ma'am, you're free to go. No questions, no warnings, just reverence." But that wasn't the end. That was the spark. Ho Karen, the clipboard-wielding tyrant who ruled the cul-de-sac like it was a banana republic, declared war on my wife and met her cybersecurity husband who just wanted a quiet life and good Wi-Fi. But what Karen didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Rachel had toppled insurgent cells with fewer resources and more honor. Karen wasn't up against a housewife. She was up against a storm in combat boots, and the suburbs would never be the same again. The moment Rachel dropped that man to the pavement like a sack of overripe avocados, I thought the worst was over. The gun was gone, the police had cleared her, and the HOA patrol, those laughable golf cart commandos, were humiliated. But I underestimated the sheer tenacity of Ho Karen, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, who couldn't stand to lose control when she was obviously in the wrong. Within hours, the war escalated. Karen issued a neighborhood-wide bulletin accusing Rachel of militant intimidation, excessive aggression, and me personal favorite, running with hostile energy. We laughed, at first. We thought the absurdity would collapse under its own weight. But Karen was just getting started. New bylaws appeared overnight. None of them voted on. None of them legal. One required visible IDs for all outdoor activity. Another gave the HOA's Home Safety Division, yes, the golf cart squad, right to issue on-the-spot fines. Then came the real slap in the face. A formal notice delivered by certified mail, demanding $1,470 in fines for a list of fabricated offenses that sounded more like a satirical dystopia than reality. Rachel read the letter once, didn't flinch, then calmly turned it over and began writing names and dates on the back like she was drawing up a mission briefing. "She just escalated to the wrong level," she muttered, voice low and certain. And that's when I knew Karen had made the biggest mistake of her clipboard-wielding career. You don't provoke someone like Rachel. You don't try to intimidate a woman who once crawled through minefields to extract civilians under enemy fire. Karen was playing HOA politics like it was Risk. Rachel, she played real-world chess with governments. What followed was a silent campaign of data, facts, and precision. Rachel began digging into HOA finances, into bylaws, into property records, and what she found was a bombshell. A fake landscaping company funneling HOA funds, or the cousin of one of the board members, known other than the same man who had pointed the gun. $180,000 had been laundered through a shell company called Verdant Horizon for projects that never happened, roads never paved, gardens never planted. We had video footage, time-stamped and clear. She sent everything to a federal auditor, not a blog, not a Facebook rant, a formal government agency. Within 48 hours, a legal inquiry was opened, and the cracks in Karen's paper-thin empire began to show. But Karen didn't retreat. No, she doubled down. She posted guards at the clubhouse door, claimed smear campaigns were threatening neighborhood security, and hosted live streams from her living room calling Rachel a domestic threat. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so wildly unhinged. The battle lines were drawn. Karen had HOA flyers. Rachel had satellite footage, military precision, and an entire neighborhood slowly waking up to the fact that they'd been ruled by fear and garden gnome tyranny. What started with a gun in the front yard had become something much bigger, and Rachel wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was taking the whole rotten system down. By the time the audit request hit Karen's inbox, hand-delivered via government courier in a windbreaker with mirrored sunglasses and the kind of posture that screams federal authority, Rachel had already mapped out every pressure point in the HOA's corrupt infrastructure. What started as a tactical response to personal harassment had evolved into a full-blown campaign of calculated exposure. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm meetings. She just did what she'd always done in the field: gathered intelligence, cross-referenced sources, and struck with surgical precision. As Karen spiraled, trying to regain control through lies and late-night live streams dripping in paranoia, Rachel doubled down on the truth. Flyers went door to door, clean, professional, sourced to the letter. They outlined the shell company, the fake fines, the illegal bylaw additions. One page even included a timeline of Karen's public lies alongside time-stamped footage. No theatrics, just facts. Karen's power, built on fear and apathy, started to collapse under the weight of public awareness. But she still didn't back down. She responded with what she thought was her trump card, a restraining order against Rachel, filled with buzzwords like psychological warfare and paramilitary tactics. But the judge saw through it immediately. He'd already received the unedited footage from several neighbors, one of whom was a retired JAG officer. The filing was tossed out before the ink could dry. And still, Karen pushed forward, sending more fines, ramping up patrols, no crouching behind bushes with binoculars like suburban snipers. It would have been laughable if it weren't so desperately pathetic. Then came the turning point. Rachel received an encrypted message, not HOA-related. Military. High clearance. 4 words. Need to verify status. Within minutes, she was on the phone with a former commander, exchanging brief confirmations. The next day, she launched Operation Curb Appeal. The mission: disarm Karen's fear campaign through community engagement. It wasn't just about holding Karen accountable anymore, it was about restoring the neighborhood. Rachel printed flyers, created infographics, distributed lawn signs that mocked the HOA's absurdity with sharp, biting humor. Smiley out are being fined for blinking, read one. Another had a cartoon Karen riding a golf cart with the phrase obey or pay. These signs started appearing on lawns like flowers after rain. Karen panicked, issued threats about signage violations, but no one listened. Rachel had shifted the tide. Neighbors who once cowered behind hedges now greeted each other. People started organizing, talking, and laughing again. And then the final bloracle's presentation at the city council. She walked in alone, carrying a single manila folder, and dismantled Karen's empire in under 10 minutes. She exposed the fraud, the threats, the fake fines, the violations of state housing laws, and when asked her background, she gave it plainly: a Tier 1 active duty operative with a decade of intelligence and operational command. The room went still. One council member, an old Army vet, leaned forward and smiled. "I thought I recognized you. Welcome home, ma'am." Karen never recovered. Her credibility shattered. Her clipboard silenced. But Rachel's mission, it was just beginning. Even after the city council hearing annihilated Karen's credibility and froze the HOA's operations under legal review, Rachel never celebrated. There was no victory lap, no smugness, just a quiet return to routine. She went back to morning jogs, tending the garden, and reviewing perimeter footage with the same calm intensity that had dismantled military operations on foreign soil. But just when the neighborhood started to exhale, when kids played outside again without fear of clipboards and lawn violations, Karen came crawling back like a cockroach after the lights come on. She showed up in a borrowed minivan, clutching a leather folder labeled personal legal defense, sunglasses perched like armor, her scarf flapping dramatically in the breeze. She walked right up to our porch without knocking, left the folder on the mat like it was a gift, then strutted off as if the last 6 months hadn't just destroyed her reputation, Rachel didn't even glance up from her tablet. "Leave it," she said. "She's baiting a reaction." Inside the folder was a letter dense, rambling, legally shaky where Karen declared herself the true victim of a military conspiracy. She claimed the audit was fake, the HOA members coerced, and that Rachel had orchestrated a campaign of classified intimidation to dismantle suburban leadership. It was delusional, but dangerous, because this letter wasn't just Karen flailing, it was her last desperate swing at relevance. Rachel read it once, gave a dry laugh, and forwarded it to the federal office that had issued the original cease and desist. She didn't need to respond with words. Karen had already buried herself in fraud, misconduct, and illegal detainment. A week later, Karen appeared in court representing herself. According to a neighbor who watched the live stream, she opened with a slideshow featuring clip art gavels, screenshots of HOA bylaws she typed in Comic Sans, and a laughably photoshopped image of Rachel standing next to a tank. Her defense: that Rachel was part of a paramilitary coup to install a new neighborhood regime. The judge listened for 10 minutes before cutting her off with a single question: "Did you ever have legal authority to fine or detain residents?" Karen tried to dodge, citing fictional bylaws. The judge didn't flinch. What followed was a legal demolition. Karen was fined, ordered to pay restitution, and barred from holding any HOA or residential leadership position for the next decade. The ruling was swift, final, and devastating. But Rachel didn't flinch, didn't smile, just returned home, made tea, and watched the neighborhood quietly rebuild. Then, just as the dust settled, a black SUV pulled up at the edge of the street. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, greeted Rachel by name, and handed her a sealed envelope. She read it in silence, eyes narrowing with a flicker hadn't seen since before the HOA battle. She turned to the man and simply asked, "When do I leave?" He answered, "Transport is ready at dawn." Rachel nodded. No goodbye, no drama, just purpose. Karen was the warm-up. The mission was calling. The morning Rachel left, the street was quiet, eerily so, like the world knew something significant had shifted. She didn't say much the night before, just placed a handwritten note on my desk. Karen was the warm-up. This is the mission. No signature, no destination, just certainty. At dawn, she stepped into that black SUV like she'd done it 1,000 times before. No glance back, no hesitation, just calm, practice motion. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the vehicle fade into the distance, knowing that wherever she was going, it wasn't suburban anymore, but the impact she left behind. In the weeks following her departure, the neighborhood transformed in ways that felt almost surreal. With Karen legally barred from power and the HOA board dissolved, the fear that had once hung like smog over our streets lifted. People waved again, not nervously, but freely. The surveillance golf carts were gone, replaced by sidewalk chalk drawings and kids on bikes. Porch lights stayed on past 9 p.m., without threats of fines. Lawns grew a little too wild, flags flew without regulation, and for the first time in months, there was laughter that didn't sound like a nervous tick. The new HOA president, Tom, a retired postal worker with a talent for grilling and an allergy to drum, eliminated every bylaw except one: don't be a jerk. And somehow, that single rule kept things running better than Karen's 30-page manifesto of neighborhood tyranny. A few neighbors threw a block party in Rachel's honor burgers, cornhole, and a playlist that featured another One Bites the Dust more than once. Someone even gifted me a lawn sign that read "Neighborhood Hero." 0 fines since 2024. Corny. Absolutely. But I left it up. Then, just as I thought things might settle into a new kind of peaceful normal, a plain manila envelope arrived. No return address. No stamp. Just one thing that stopped my breath cold: military clearance codes I hadn't seen since Rachel's last deployment. Inside was a single certificate and official commendation from the Department of Defense. It recognized her exceptional conduct and civilian oversight in defense of constitutional rights. No medal, no ceremony, just a formal document and a short handwritten note: "We're proud of how you handled it. See you soon." That night, I sat alone on the porch, the stars above clear and sharp, the air still. I wondered where she was, what operation needed someone like her again. Because wherever it was, I knew they hadn't called lightly. You don't tap someone like Rachel unless it really matters. And maybe that's what stuck with me the most, not the fights, not the legal chaos, not even the viral footage, but the fact that when faced with a small tyrant trying to rule with fear, my wife didn't just fight back. She rebuilt something better. She reminded an entire neighborhood what freedom felt like. And then, when her work was done, she vanished into the next storm without a sound. It had been a full month since Rachel disappeared into that black SUV, and while the neighborhood had begun to settle into a rhythm of real peace, I knew the story wasn't finished. We were still receiving little ripples of the impact she left behind, neighbors organizing potlucks instead of patrols, spontaneous front porch jam sessions, and a general vibe of we survived something ridiculous together. The HOA, as we knew it, was officially gone, and Tom Good, dependable Tom, had turned the HOA website into a gardening tips blog. But despite the calm, I could feel it in my bones. The final chapter hadn't arrived yet. I was right. One warm afternoon, just as we were wrapping up from a neighborhood cookout, I saw it. A vehicle at the sleek black SUV of government transport, but a silver rental minivan, crawling up the street like it belonged to a PTA meeting. I narrowed my eyes and set down my tongs. Out stepped Karen. Of course it was her. Same oversized sunglasses. Same desperate aura of someone trying to reclaim power they never really had. She clutched a thick leather-bound folder labeled Personal Legal Defense 2.0 like it was a holy text. Without a word, she marched up to our porch and gently placed it on our welcome mat, like a bomb made of paperwork. I didn't move. I just watched her from behind the screen door, heart calm. Rachel had prepared me for this, Karen's last gasp. Inside the folder was a letter filled with dense legal jargon, claiming she was the true victim of a sophisticated military-led smear campaign. She cited obscure housing laws, cherry-picked court rulings, and even included a poorly photoshopped image of Rachel standing beside a tank under the caption "Proof of Paramilitary Infiltration." It was unhinged, but not unexpected. Karen wasn't apologizing. She was flailing, trying to rewrite history with delusion and deflection. Rachel had called this, down to the last tactic. I scanned the letter, chuckled once, and calmly forwarded it to the same federal office that had issued the cease and desist. Then I poured a glass of iced tea and returned to the cookout. A week later, the court date arrived. Karen, ever the showboat, chose to represent herself again. According to a neighbor who live-streamed the hearing from his phone while barbecuing in a Captain Clipboard apron, her defense included a PowerPoint presentation with slide transitions and at least 2 Comic Sans fonts. She rambled about HOA sovereignty, neighborhood sanctity, and strategic intimidation via athletic apparel. The judge listened for exactly 10 minutes before dropping the gavel. Her authority had never been legal. Her conduct bordered on impersonation of law enforcement, and her actions had caused measurable harm to residents. She was fined, ordered to pay restitution, and banned from residential leadership for 10 years. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I just texted Rachel's secure contact and wrote, "It's done." She didn't reply, but I imagined her somewhere, halfway across the world, smiling faintly in silence. Mission complete. After Karen's courtroom down fell complete, with Comic Sans exhibits and her infamous strategic intimidation via athletic apparel, linen, neighborhood didn't erupt into cheers. It exhaled. It was the deep, cathartic breath of a community that had been holding tension in its shoulders for far too long. The HOA was gone. Karen was legally muzzled, and the absurdity of her reign became the stuff of local legend. Someone even made t-shirts that read "I survived the clipboard regime" and sold them at the weekend market. But the true sign of peace came not with the fines or rulings, but in the little things. People stopped glancing over their shoulders when setting out lawn chairs. Kids chalked dragons and unicorns across the sidewalk without fearing HOA fines for excessive whimsy. Porch lights stayed on late. Flag sports teams, pride, pirate them, and flew freely. It was the kind of neighborhood Rachel had hoped for when we first moved in. Not perfect, but human, real. Tom, in his classic understated way, kept things grounded. His first official act as HOA president was to reduce the rules to a single laminated page. Rule 1. Don't be a jerk. Rule 2. See Rule 1. Nobody argued. The simplicity was beautiful. A few neighbors even organized a block party in Rachel's Honorburgers, cornhole, and a playlist that somehow turned into a tribute to 80s action movies. Someone set up a projector and played the viral footage of Rachel disarming Captain Clipboard on a loop. Every time his body hit the pavement, the crowd erupted like it was the Super Bowl. Someone handed me a lawn sign that read Neighborhood Hero. 0 fines since 2024. It was cheesy, but I kept it. Rachel would have rolled her eyes and smiled. Then, something unexpected arrived. A plain manila envelope, tucked into our mailbox without postage. It was stamped with military clearance codes I hadn't seen since the last time Rachel deployed. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single certificate and official commendation from the Department of Defense for exceptional conduct and civilian oversight in defense of constitutional rights. No parade, no press release, just a document and a handwritten note. We're proud of how you handled it. See you soon. I stared at it for a long while, heart caught between pride and something else something like awe. Rachel had never fought for recognition. She fought to restore balance, to protect people who didn't even know they needed it. Later that evening, I left the document on the coffee table and walked outside. The stars were out, porch lights glowing soft. One of the neighbors across the street waved with a beer in hand. Another brought over a bag of zucchini from her garden. Civilization, I thought. The good kind. And just as I sat down on the porch, crickets chirping and wind rustling through the trees Rachel had planted, I saw it, the faint gleam of headlights turning the corner. Not ominous, not alarming, but official in that quiet, unmistakable way. The next mission was calling. The headlights rolled slowly down the street, cutting through the evening like a whisper of something inevitable. Not loud, not Rashed's precise, deliberate. I set down my glass of tea and stood up, watching from the porch as the black SUV came to a smooth stop just outside our house. It wasn't the same one that had picked Rachel up months ago, but it had the same presence, unmarked, humming with the kind of quiet authority you can't fake. The driver stepped out, tall, square-shouldered, suit crisp and military sharp. His hair was cut short enough to slice air, and his eyes scanned the street like he already knew where every shadow belonged. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. Rachel was already at the door. She opened it like she'd been expecting him, which, knowing her, she probably had for weeks. They didn't hug, didn't shake hands, just exchanged a nod that said everything without saying a word. He handed her a sealed envelopethic, official, lined with codes only a few people on the planet would understand. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. But I saw the flicker, that old intensity, that unmistakable readiness. She looked at me, eyes steady, and I knew. When do I leave? She asked. Transport is ready at dawn, he replied. She nodded once. No hesitation. That night, she packed light. A small duffel bag, her boots, a plain black field jacket. No goodbyes, no dramatic speeches, just the methodical calm of someone sliding back into purpose like it was second skin. I found a note on my desk before bed. It was even shorter than the last one. This time, it matters more. I didn't sleep much. I sat on the porch, the air cool and soft, listening to the wind move through the trees she'd planted with her own hands. This time was different, not because I doubted her, it was the opposite. I knew exactly what she was walking into. You don't send Rachel Vaughn unless the stakes are real, unless something somewhere is broken in ways only she can fix. At sunrise, she walked out in silence, duffel slung over one shoulder, boots laced tight. She didn't look back. I didn't expect her to. Some people leave footprints. Rachel leaves shifts in atmosphere. The SUV door shut behind her like the closing of a chapter. And just like that, she was gone again, off to another part of the world that didn't know how badly it needed her. The neighborhood stayed asleep, quiet, peaceful. Tom would probably be outside watering his roses in an hour, and someone down the street was already brewing coffee. Life moved forward, and that's what Rachel had fought for, to give people the luxury of normal. And as I sat there, porch bathed in golden light, I realized something. Karen was never the real enemy. She was just the spark. The mission Rachel's mission was and always would be peace through vigilance. And this was far from over. Valuable lesson. True strength isn't measured by how loudly you command, how many rules you write, or how much control you think you have. It's measured by quiet resilience, strategic integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when no one else will. In a world where petty power can be abused behind clipboards and community bylaws, the greatest defense is knowledge, unity, and calm precision. Rachel didn't defeat oppression with fists or fury. She dismantled it with facts, accountability, and grace. The lesson is simple but profound. Real leadership doesn't need fear to function, it needs purpose. And sometimes, the most powerful revolution starts with a morning jog, a garden, and the decision not to back down.